Great. So just by way of introduction, so my name's Jack. I'm a radiology registrar working at University College London Hospitals in London in my first year. Some of you may know me as Mr. Radiologist, which is my YouTube channel.
Hi guys, I'm Jakob. I am a radiology ST1 at University College London Hospitals as well. Prior to radiology, I was an IMT trainee, and then just recently I entered radiology. Best decision of my life. Hopefully will persuade you to do radiology and talk more about the application process now.
Right. So as I said earlier, and also for the new joiners, this is being recorded, so you can keep your camera off, and we'll upload the whole webinar onto our website, which is aceradiology.com. Actually, Jakob, you might want to type that into the chat, just so people have that. As I said earlier, there'll be three parts to this. Three parts to the series, and today's the first one, which is on portfolio. The other parts will be on the MSRA, which will be hopefully later this month. We've not got a date yet. And the last part will be on interviews, which we'll do probably after the invitations to interviews come out, which will be next year. If you're not on the mailing list yet, make sure to join the mailing list to get the updates for when the webinars are happening, and the link to that is on our website as well. Okay, so I think we can probably make a start. So just as an outline of the webinar itself, we'll talk a little bit about the application timetable, and then we'll go into the requirements for the radiology portfolio. Now, for those of you who filled out the form, firstly, thanks very much. That really helps guide what we teach. So it seems like there's a mix of people who are applying both this year, as well as those who haven't started applying yet. And a few of you, I think, haven't come to the UK yet, or maybe planning to come to the UK. So we'll be talking a bit about some changes you can make to your portfolio, even if you're applying this year. So with the deadline being December, there is still time to get more points on your portfolio. And then we'll also talk about things that you can do if you have a bit more time to try and get maximum points on your application. So we'll go off. I'll leave Jakob for this part.
So I'm sure those of you applying this year are aware of the application timings. This is freely available on the RCA website and the ORL website. So the applications are open. Do get your applications in. Just be aware that all the because on the application you have to score yourself, and you have to make sure you get all the scorings in and all the evidence for the scorings by the submission date. So say you do a QIP now and finish it after the submission date, that won't count. We'll get to the details of that later on in the webinar, so just be aware of that. And the deadline date is on the 1st of December, as you can see. And then after that, you get the verification. You get sent a link to upload everything, and in the first 2 weeks will be the MSRA of January 2023 would be the MSRA window. And as Jack said, we have a webinar coming up how to best tackle that, so do sign up to the register list, and we'll send the link out when it becomes available, and we'll do a live webinar then again. And then early March 2023 is the interview process, which we'll do another webinar on, and then offers come out at the end of March. And please do write as we go along. Do write your questions into the chat box, and as I said, at the end we will be doing a Q&A session. So person specification, this has changed a bit. Make sure you look at this in detail. I can't emphasize how important this is. The biggest changes this year have been the MRCP and MRCS exams. That has been taken away, so you don't need to do that to score any points. Intercalated degrees have been removed. However, you can still score if you have intercalated. So do wait. We'll get to that in the webinar. Also, it's a good way to check your eligibility. So make sure you've got, obviously, for those of you applying abroad, have full registration with license to practice by the start date. Have your CREST forms filled in by the application date. If you are a foundation trainee, make sure you have your foundation certificate ready to submit. And if you're an F3 or 4, your certificate within 3.5 years. If you've gone past that 3.5 years, you would need a CREST form, unfortunately. You'd also need, for those of you from abroad, you'd also need to have 12 months of medical experience after your GMC registration. This doesn't have to be NHS experience, just general medical experience post-graduation. You can find a lot in the link below just here. It's on the HEE website. The other thing to also mention is the reason I emphasize the importance of the person specification is at the end page, at the last page of the person specification, they sometimes vary year on year. The reason being is they sort of make the theme of the interview out of the desirable and essential requirements at the bottom of the last page. For example, last year I think it was related to there were questions on coping under stress and teamwork, for example. So it's always good to have a look at that.
Right, so let's talk about the first section in the radiology portfolio, and that's the commitment to specialty. So this is one of those sections where you can very reasonably score full marks in, and also it's a section where you still have time to score full marks. So when you look at the self-assessment checklist, there are different scores and different things you need to get. To get the maximum score, this has changed recently as well. You have to do multiple exposures within a radiology department. So when they say multiple exposures, what they mean or what they define it as is essentially 3 days in a radiology department, and that can be either doing a taste a week, or it can be being involved in a research project, or if before being a doctor's in medical school, doing a medical elective or a student selected component during your during your medical school. There's more information, so we put a bit more detail about this on our website, so you can always look through that in your own time. So practically how to get those points. So if you're in a rush, so if you've applied this year, the quickest way would just be to get 2 taster weeks. For those who don't know, taster weeks are essentially a week in a radiology department, following radiologists and seeing what they do. And it's good for multiple reasons, not just for the points. It's also good because you get to know some of the registrars and the consultants there, and then that can lead to you getting help with the other parts of the portfolio, such as the audits and also publication sections. If you're really in a rush and you perhaps don't have enough days to take off or don't have many days to take off, because they define a significant exposure as 3 days, you could theoretically do 2 taster weeks, each of them 3 days long, which would add up to about 6 days of leave that you'd need to take. I would just caveat that by saying that ideally I would personally take a full week if you can, just because you get to know the team a lot better and they're more likely to then help you with other things. Another thing that they've specified about the taster weeks is that they have to be different. They have to be in different healthcare settings. So this is a bit that they initially said it had to be 1 district general hospital and 1 tertiary referral centre. But later an email was sent out by HEE saying that it just had to be a different healthcare setting. So what does that actually mean? An example would be, well, one example would be a tertiary centre and a DGH, but another could be, for example, a general radiology taster week, and then one in, say, either nuclear medicine or in interventional radiology. And the key thing to remember about those is that whichever you choose to do, make sure it says very clearly in the confirmation letter from the organizer of the taster week that it did have a particular theme. So when it comes to organizing these, the best way is to essentially go to the radiology department in your hospital and say hi to people and just ask who's organizing them. If they don't know, then usually the training program director for radiology would know. So they're another person that you can ask or email. Another thing is you might be saying that I've already done a taster week in my current hospital. Can you do them in different hospitals? So the answer is yes. So when I did 2 taster weeks myself before applying for radiology, and one of them was in a hospital that I'd never worked in before. And the way that I'd managed to secure that was to email the training program director, and I explained to them I was in a district general hospital thinking of radiology, and I really wanted to have some experience in a big tertiary centre. And what they helped me to do is they helped to organise an honorary contract for me. So I think I had to show some of the occupational health documents and go through a little bit of a mini induction, but it did mean that I could do a taster week in a different setting. And currently, I'm organising Taste Weeks for my hospital. I've been able to help other Taste Week doctors do that for themselves as well. So they're currently organising honorary contracts. The thing to note about that is that it can take a bit of time to organise those. So it might be a bit of a tight squeeze to get it in for this application round, but it is possible to do that. If you're in medical school or you're an early junior doctor, and you have a bit more time, then definitely think about organising a medical elective in radiology. You'd organise those the same as any other elective by either just Googling opportunities for medical student electives or emailing departments and asking what the process is to apply for those. Or for student selected components in medical school, normally you'll do student selected component and you just pick from a list. If they don't have the one that you're interested in, then you can just, usually they let you design your own as long as you have a supervisor that's willing to help you. So on to Jakob for the next couple of sections.
Yep. Guys, do you keep your questions coming in? I can see some people have written questions. We will definitely answer them at the end of the webinar, so don't worry, we will answer all your questions. So leadership and management, a key area to score potentially high scores on. Now, this has changed a bit. The reason being, as you know, radiology has become really competitive for a lot of good reasons. I think this year the competition ratio was 1 in 6. So every 6 applicants, there's one place essentially. So it's very competitive. And now the MSRA has been chosen for other specialties as well. This also causes an increase in applications to radiology as other people apply for multiple different specialties. And one way the college is trying to, or HEC is trying to filter these people out is through making the requirements for the portfolio more radiology specific. So before in leadership management, you didn't have to have radiology related or specific roles, but now to score a maximum of 7 points, you would have need to held a radiology-related national leadership or managerial role. This could be in med school, this could be during uni, or even as a postgraduate doctor. Now, I'll tell you how I managed to get that. So the thing about leadership management is it's actually not that difficult. There are a variety of different societies, radiology societies being, SRT being one, and IR juniors being one. What I did was I went to all the events, showed my face, showed my interest in the societies, and then sort of applied to try and become a member, and then work my way up to become one of the committee members. And this all happened in a year. And if I've done it, you can too. So I was recently the IR Juniors England conference lead and helped sort of set up conferences around the UK for interventional radiology. To hit this top mark, you have to have held the role for 6 months. So that's the criteria. But if it's too much short of a notice and you feel that you can't achieve that, you can also, if you've had any sort of local or regional role related to radiology, that you could also score 5 points. Alternatively, even if it's not related to radiology. So what could that be? For example, if you were the foundation year rep, or even the MES president rep, that also counts. Or simply during medical school, if you sort of had with a treasurer or president, or had any managerial role in your career or during medical school, you can use that as well. It does not have to be radiology related to hit the 5 points, as long as it's sort of healthcare related. Or if you've had any sort of leadership management role outside of healthcare, even before medicine, even or during medical school, that counts as well. So definitely get that in. Look back into your medical school time, any sort of roles you've had, or even if you can make your own society up, for example, and some people have done that, and you can become the leader or the president or whatever and score points. The key thing is having that role for 6 months is key, essentially. Teaching and training. So this is another area that's changed a bit. I'll tell you what I did again to get the maximum points here. So for 5 points, you need to have had a major contribution to a national or international teaching program. Now, what does it mean by major contribution? Essentially, you would have to have made up your own teaching program lasting for 3 months, not more, not less. So 3 months is enough, more than enough. So how did I do it? So each hospital you work in, and this also, if I'm sure the international medical graduates are not aware of this, but each hospital that you work in has a postgraduate centre and undergraduate centre, and each postgraduate centre has a teaching fellow. So what I did was I approached the teaching fellow and I said, I'm one of the trainees. Then I was an internal medicine trainer. I said, I'm one of the trainees. I'm really interested in setting up a teaching program. So I made a list of topics that would run for 3 months. I recruited consultants, registrars to do fortnightly teaching, and also emailed a few companies to cater for the event. So, I'm sure you guys have been to a few sort of seminars at work where a random drug companies come and give them some food and have done a presentation in return. So that's what I did essentially, and managed to score maximum points there. You also would have evidence is also key. So you make sure you get some sort of letter from your consultant or registrar that you've done this. It's very important, and also feedback from your teaching that you've done on this teaching program. Another way to score high points, I'll give you advice on, is especially related pertaining to the international seminar aspect of it. So as you've heard, so I'm sure a lot of you are aware of the Royal Society of Medicine. Now they do quite frequently, they're involved in setting up seminars and holding seminars in different types of specialities. So I just emailed one of the leads, the education lead there, and said, hey, I'm interested in setting up a finals medical student seminar for final year exams. And they're very keen and had a positive response back. And again, I recruited consultants and registrars to teach on this one-day seminar. And it was a national seminar, so I went out to everyone around the UK and managed to score. Again, you can score equally high points. So to come back to the point about the local or regional teaching program, how you can even make that as a national teaching program. Well, the way I did that was I essentially sent out the teaching link, which was on Teams then, to all the different hospitals around the UK. Then it automatically becomes a national seminar, teaching seminar. So that's a sort of a trick way to do it, and it still technically is national, and you do score maximum points there. If you've done ad hoc teaching, great, that'll still score you 2 points. Make sure you get evidence, make sure you get feedback. If you've had any sort of major contribution to a local or regional teaching program, so if a registrar's set one up and you've just been involved, as long as it's run for 3 months, you still score 4 points. So there's a lot of way around that. You definitely, especially those of you applying next year, you can still hit these marks easily. And these are some of the ideas where you can use to sort of tailor your teaching. So you can do one on easy chest X-rays, or if you're interested in sort of ultrasound guided cannula insertion and so on, as you can see from the list, or you can just do non-radiology related ones. If you're sort of a surgical SHO or an F1, how to do suturing, or how to manage surgical emergencies, or those of you who are medics can do acute medical emergencies. Does not matter at all, and does not have to be radiology related. So don't worry about that. As long as it's teaching for 3 months, that's all that matters. Teaching qualifications. Now, this one is obviously, it's either you have it or you don't have it. Those of you applying for next year, you'd be more interested in this for next year. At the moment, it's possibly a bit difficult to gain any points here. But essentially what I did was, for the 4 points, I did a clinical education online distance learning postgraduate PG cert, which will score me here 4 points. And it does cost a bit of money, and it takes a year, and you can only finish it, and then only when you finish it you can say obviously you have the PG cert. You can't submit this as evidence if you're still on it. The other thing you can do is the teacher course, which is 2 days long. I think there's a few courses going online now, and if you just Google it, any teacher course now until the time of submission, which is the 1st of December, if you've completed the 2 days, again you can use that. But again, this costs money, and then I would say, you could possibly spend that time revising for the MSRA and make up for the points there. MSRA is really, really important. Can't emphasize how important it is. You can have 100 points in your portfolio, but if you don't score well in the MSRA, you're not getting an offer or an interview. So very important to balance this, guys.
Great, thanks, Jakob. I'll talk a bit about audit and quality improvement now. So for those of you who don't know, audits and quality improvement projects are some of the processes we have in the NHS for ensuring that we maintain the quality of the healthcare, and also that we constantly improve. And for audits in particular, you usually would base that on a national guideline, and you would compare your service outcomes or your service sort of results against that. guideline. So when it comes to the scoring, to get the maximum points, this is a little bit of a change from previously, in that you now need to have radiology-themed audits or QIPs, and you need to have 2 of them that you have led as sort of the main organizer of the project. Also, you need to have demonstrated a change in practice. What that realistically means is that if you're doing audits, you would have to have done your first cycle, have done an intervention, and then audited for a second cycle. So close the loop, as it were, and it would be a similar thing for the quality improvement project as well. In terms of how to get them, now they do take a little bit of time to do, so you'd be in a bit of a rush to get it in for this application round, unless you're already doing one. But the best way to get radiology themed ones, as I said earlier, is through things like taster weeks, SSCs, and electives, because that way you can get to know registrars and consultants who can help you along with these. For the registrars, they have to produce an audit every year, so they're usually more than happy to have people helping them with them. And just to give an example, at least 2 doctors who've come for our taster weeks, I've given them audits to be involved with. We're about to finish one of them now, which is a closed loop radiology themed one. So that's going to score the guy some points in there. That would get, say, 5 points unless they've done another one. So definitely do taster weeks, because it really helps, especially if you sort of offer your help around to all the registrars. Now, if you're doing an audit, the key thing is to do one that's very short and sweet, and one that will definitely be finished within a reasonable sort of time frame. And the way to do that is, let's see if I have the slide. Yeah, so the link for this is on our website, actually, in the portfolio section, but there is essentially a database of radiology themed audit templates on the RCR website, and you can search for them, and they already have their protocols in there. So you don't even have to do any work for designing the study or doing sort of literature reviews to find out what the guidelines are. They're already on here, and the key is to select one that's to find one that's quick to do. It's generally speaking, it's quite easy in radiology because a lot of the information and the data is stored electronically, as opposed to in, say, paper medical notes. So make sure that whichever audit you do, it's something that is electronic, and where the data can be collected very easily. Because there's nothing worse than having to go to medical records and wait months for them to find paper notes for you to trawl through. The other thing to do with audits is to make sure you pick the right supervisor. By that I mean someone who you know has produced a fair number of audits before, if that makes sense, because this applies for the publication section as well, actually, but you essentially want them to be someone who will push you to finish the audit and keep you on track, and be able to help you with sort of all aspects of it. But some examples of good quick audits to do are, say, CTPA audits, and that's one of the ones that we're doing. And there are more in there that you can obviously look at. For your evidence to include, get a signed letter from the supervising consultant confirming that you led the audit and it was a closed loop. Also include the PowerPoint presentation. With audits, you would you'd always present them at a clinical governance meeting. So include the PowerPoint if you have it, or if you haven't got around to that stage yet, you can just make a summary describing the audit you did, so the methods and so some of the results and things. That's it. Just go back and check. If you can't do a radiology themed one, then if you've led one in another specialty, for example, which many of you may have, then that will still count for some of the points. And I suppose if you're in a sort of a point of desperation with not much time left, you can ask to just contribute to some of the data collection for an audit that's happening now, and they get a signed letter to confirm that you did some data collection and get the minimum points of 2. And I should also mention that with the scoring system for all of these sections, the thing that you only get scored for the highest scoring category, if that makes sense. So if you've done 5 audits related to radiology, or if you've done 2 audits related to radiology, you'd get the same number of points. So make sure you ration your time wisely. So academic achievements, to get maximum points here, they said you have to have a postgraduate research degree, which basically means a degree with a thesis, like a PhD or an MD. Like the previous section on teaching qualifications, you'll either have these on or you won't. So I'll definitely say don't apply to do a PhD purely for the radiology application, because you'll end up spending 3 or 4 years doing it, and essentially it's just not worth it. So don't do it unless you want to be an academic in future. Don't even entertain the idea. The best thing to do is the thing that will score you 1 point fewer, so 4 points, which is to get a first author on a radiology themed publication. Again, to find the opportunities for these, go through taster weeks, electives, SSCs, make some contacts in the radiology departments, and then ask to work on some publications. If you're doing a publication, you want to pick something, again, that's quick and achievable to complete. And these tend to be things like case reports. So among my publications, the case report, one of the case reports I did was the quickest. And that was about 6 months from starting it to having it accepted by the paper. And that's a combination of not just the time writing it, but also the delays waiting for a response from the journal. So bear in mind that publications do take time as well. So you want to start as early as you can for these. So case reports are quite a good one. The longest thing that I've done would be something like a systematic review, and that took about 2 years. So, make sure you really pick something simple. We're not trying to do anything groundbreaking with the application. Just get something finished. The other way you can score points, if you don't think you'll get a publication through, is through a national or international presentation in a radiology conference, and that can be either an oral or poster presentation. So for these, there are lots of conferences you can Google pretty much, such as with the BIR, so British Institute of Radiology. It has a national conference. There are lots and lots of subspecialty conferences as well. And the thing you need to do is pretty much just find something you've done. So for example, an audit, or if it's a research paper, then fine, you can present that. You have to present them before they're published, though. I think that's a rule for all conferences. And then just submit them to the conference, or submit them to multiple ones if you have to. Before you submit, of course, just to note, you have to make sure your co-authors are okay with it too. But the reason I say just submit to them is because a lot of these places will accept, especially poster presentations, partly, and this might be me being a bit cynical, but partly because if you give someone a poster presentation to do, then they'll have to buy a conference ticket. But either way, you end up getting a national or international conference. And even if you think that your project is not very good, or it's not worth presenting, or you don't think you'll be accepted, still just submit it, because honestly, I think one of my national presentations was for a fluid prescribing audit or something really bad, but I managed to get it into a conference. Part of it is also how you sort of sell it. So I sold that as like a sort of post-op surgical fluid management audit. If you can't manage those, then you can look at getting some of the lower points, such as getting any kind of oral or poster presentation. When they don't specify it has to be national or international, you can pretty much just present it in your own hospital at a clinical governance meeting or something, and then just get a minimum points. And also at the end, you have to score 1 point. If you've done an intercalated degree, although you don't score points for it per se, you can count it in this part if you're involved in a research team for that. And on to Jakob for prizes and awards.
So prizes and awards, definitely an area you can still potentially gain points on before submission or deadline. So first thing, to score maximum points, going back to medical school, if you scored very high in your finals, or like sort of first, or with a certain top percent in your cohort, then you can potentially get a distinction. You can get 6 points for this, but then you'd have to provide evidence how many people were in the top X percent. If there are a lot of people, they might not count it, so you have to be careful. It might be a long-winded process, so just keep that in mind. Alternatively, if you've had any prizes awarded related to radiology, that would also score very high points. So the way I went around doing this was I submitted so there was an essay going on at the Society of Radiologists in Training Society, and that's sort of a national or international essay competition. And I submitted my essay, and thankfully won, and that's how I got my 6 points. There is still a few essay competitions going on. One I'm aware of is the RADCAS essay competition, which I think the deadline is around 20 or 22nd December or something. You can check the link in our website for more information. So definitely think about doing that. If you've had any sort of prizes awarded, doesn't have to be radiology related, in your regional area where you work, that's 3 points. If you've had more than one prize from your hospital, that's 2 points. Again, it could be anything because they haven't really specified it. You just need to provide evidence. If you've only one prize, then it's 1 point from a meeting. As I mentioned, you still do have time with regards to the essay competition, and prizes wise, it could literally be, they've kept it vague. So any sort of recognition you've got, I would definitely submit it. And on this slide, you can see all the prizes that we have listed, and you can definitely check these out on our website and on the links below. So top tips from us with regards to your commitment to specialities. To score the top marks, do 2 different taster weeks. So as Jack said, it can be 3 days each long. One has to be DGH or general radiology. The other one can be subspecialty. It could be interventional radiology. It could be specifically nuclear medicine, or specifically MSK, or specifically, for example, uroradiology or neuroradiology. And make sure you get confirmation letter with regards to that. Also, another way to get maximum points in this section is any sort of elective you had in med school, SSE, integrated degree, whatever, just include that in this first part to score the maximum points. With regards to leadership management, join committees from now on. Make sure you show your face to everyone. Go to the events, say you're motivated and keen, or simply just start one yourself. You can still score the maximum points. And who's to stop you? No one can stop you. You can potentially do that. Teaching wise, there are still teacher courses going on, as I'm aware. If you just Google them, I'm sure you can find a few. As long as you finish it by deadline submission date, you can still score at least 2 points with regards to that. If you've got more time, you can consider doing a PG Cert course or train the trainer course for next year, which takes a few more days. With regards to the audit or QIP, make sure you score the max points. You do 2 radiology specific audits, and you have to lead them and show that you've brought about a change in practice. And what that essentially means is you've basically closed the loop. And if you've got a letter confirming that, that's more than enough. If you upload the letter and the PowerPoint presentation or any evidence that you've led the audit QIP, that's job done. National prizes, as I've said, check out our website, ace-radiology.com, for a comprehensive list.
Great, excellent. So we'll just go through some of the questions now. I'll just scroll to the top and we'll have a look at the first. So first question from Dylan is, a taste a week alone would qualify as 10 points, question mark. So one taste a week alone would only qualify for not 10 points, but the one before. Let's just go back and see exactly how much that was. So as you can see now, would qualify for 6 points. So one taste a week in one healthcare setting is one significant exposure to radiology. So you would need a second one to get the maximum points. And as we said, there is time still to do that. And I was given a certificate instead of a letter, signed and stamped. Yep, a certificate or a letter, both, as long as they're signed and stamped by some kind of senior figure, that will count for points, and that applies for all of the sections. So just make sure that they're signed. Next, from Ayman, coming into radiology, multiple exposure. Does multiple exposures to radiology include an audit, or does it have to be a research project? So the criteria, which you can find. So I should tell you, can find the checklist itself on Oriel. ORIEL. That's the website for specialty application to the UK. Just find clinical radiology in the vacancies and go into the documents link, and then you can load it up. But on there, it stipulates that it has to be a research project. It doesn't say audit, so I wouldn't risk it by necessarily only doing an audit. I think if you have a radiology themed audit, you might be able to just include that as evidence, but at the bottom of your list of evidence, if that makes sense. Because when you upload your documents, you put the sort of biggest hitting awards first, and then at the end you might put something that you think might count. But it does say research projects, so probably just stick to research projects if you can. The other thing is, unfortunately, my trust only lets you use 5 days across F1 and 2 for taster days. Would it be okay to do a 3-day placement in one and a 5-day placement in another? Yep, so as we said, 3 days would count as one exposure. So you could do it in 6 days over the 2 years. The other thing you can do is if you have a set of night shifts, for example, you usually have 0 days afterwards, or if you work the weekend, so you can always add on those 0 days and just pretty much just do the taster weeks on some of the 0 days. And that doesn't take from your study leave budget. The only thing is obviously make sure you sort of look after yourselves and don't burn out, because there's a reason you have 0 days. Again, it is important. Dylan, can you explain how being a committee member can display a leadership role? Jakob, I'll let you take that.
Yeah, I can take that question. So essentially, I'll give you an example from myself. So I was part of the IR Juniors committee, and each committee member has a defined role. So I was the England conference lead. Someone else was the treasurer. Someone else was the president. So you have a defined role once you're a committee member, and then whatever the role is, technically that's a managerial / leadership role, right? So that would count.
Great, thanks, Jakob. Another question. If you have a radiology placement as an FY1, will that count as a taster, or do you require a separate taster week? Really good question. So for those of you who don't know, there are only a couple of radiology F1 places. I think they tend to be places with interventional radiology, a bit like having a surgical F1. If you read the sort of the criteria word for word, I would count this as a significant exposure to radiology. Get some kind of signed confirmation of that. Also put in the evidence your although actually when you upload your portfolio, you also upload your employment history, so it should be in there too, and it'll say radiology in there. I would also do a taster week as well, just to be doubly sure, because sometimes if you think of it, the people marking the portfolio are human as well, so there's a little bit of room for interpretation. So I would, to be safe, just do a taster week as well. Next question, no, being a peer teacher during final year in med school with 3 weekly sessions for 9 months with feedback and completion certificate from the clinical dean, does that count as regional or local teaching points? Jakob, I might let you answer the teaching one.
So the criteria is for 3 months regular teaching with feedback. That will count as definitely count as local teaching. So yes.
Next, if we gain more points after we submit our application, can we request to change our total points? So this is something that historically they've been quite rigid on, which is you have to have got the points before you submit the application. So if you don't have the points by the 1st of December, they pretty much won't accept it. So and they have been sort of fairly strict on that in the past. So really do just try and get things in before then. Okay, another question from Eamon. In terms of evidence for taster weeks, is a letter signed by the radiology consultant sufficient? Yes. Normally, if you email the organizer of the taster week after you finish, they will provide you with a signed letter or certificate. If you want to include involvement in clinical research as an experience for commitment to specialty, do you think the paper has to be published, or does it still count if it's ongoing? Can you get a letter from the consultant stating your ongoing involvement? So we're asking about the commitment to specialty section. So as long as it meant that you had 3 days at least in a radiology department working on the research project, then it should count. Make sure you have some kind of evidence to back that up. For audits, is a letter from the RAS consultant or your ES, so educational supervisor or clinical supervisor, enough, or does it have to be presentation slides or audit report certificate? Okay, so a letter, if the letter has enough detail, it should be enough, but again, it's a human being marking the portfolio. So what you want to do is you want to give them enough information or enough evidence that there's no way they can refuse to give you the points, is the way to think of it. So for example, I know a guy who did an international oral presentation, amazing, but the only evidence he had was literally the ID badge for the conference that said presenter on it. He didn't upload a certificate, he didn't upload his PowerPoint presentation, and they didn't give him the points, like even though he flew to America to give this talk. So put as much in as you can related to it, just so it gives them confidence that you haven't just faked the letter pretty much. I know none of you would do that, but you have to reassure them. What advice do you have with regards to identifying audits and QIPs that are short and concise? So some of these we've put on our website, the sort of short ones, but things to look at are, so an example of a really quick audit would be a closed cycle audit, would be one where you can, for the first cycle, collect retrospective data. So the data is already there. All you have to do is search for it, say 1 month in the past, and then collect the data, do a change, and then for the next month, collect your second cycle. So that means in 1 month, you can have collected 2 cycles worth of data, if that makes sense. So to get something that's short and concise has to be something where the data is, as I said, electronic. So for example, for the CTPA audit that actually Jakob and I are doing together with the Taste of Week Doctor, you're looking through old scans and measuring things. The scans are already on the computer in the database. You just have to pull them up and then do your measurements and record things. So we managed to collect good data really quickly for that, actually. I think it was only in a few days we collected 100 patients worth of data. So those sorts of things are quick. Things that are slow are things that involve getting paper forms filled out by patients, for example, or getting your colleagues to fill out paper forms or other kinds of forms. Those things tend to take a long time, and also forms get lost and people don't fill them in. So anything where there is room for humans to slow you down are things you shouldn't include.
Also, just to mention, go on the RCR Audit Live website. There's so many template audits there. They've literally written up for you. All you have to do is just repeat what's on the document. You don't need to even write up. All you have to write is your results essentially on the document. So that's really, really, really easy way to do it. Go on the Audit RCR website, go through each template and see which one's a quick and easy one to do. If you just go Google RCR Audit Live, it comes up.
Right, thanks, Jakob. Next, about academic achievements. I note that they say it has to involve diagnostic imaging. What does this actually mean? Could something to do with IR count, or for instance, a survey-based project surveying radiologists about a certain topic? Does it have to be PubMed ID'ed, or can you get away with DOIs? I think previously it hasn't needed a PubMed ID. So a few elements to that question. Diagnostic imaging, IR. I mean, Jakob, you're more involved in the IR side. I don't know if you. I think it would be okay, but
no, this would be 100% okay, because I can give an example from myself. So when I submitted my evidence, I had done a cardiology rating imaging paper. It wasn't interventional radiology or interventional cardiology even. It was just cardiac imaging, working with cardiologists, and that worked. And I did submit my PubMed ID. I think they did somewhere in the person spec or the criterion ORIAL. They do ask for ORCID ID. So you do need to sort of show that you've published it, or anything from the editor saying, it's in press, at least the bare minimum.
Yep, and thanks, Jakob. I was just thinking about one of my publications. It involved MRI, but it was MRI wasn't sort of I wouldn't say it was necessarily the main reason we did the paper, if that makes sense. But it was sort of more of a surgical paper probably, but they accepted it still. So that's definitely something that can be done. You asked about PubMed ID. In the criteria, I think it doesn't specify PubMed ID at the moment. However, if you're thinking of applying in the coming years, with things going as they are, with portfolio inflation as it is, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they're wanting PubMed ID'ed journals. Jakob, I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I agree. I think they only specified the ORCID ID.
Do they? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so if you can get PubMed ID, that'd be good. And there are several journals that count for that. For case reports, say BMJ case reports is a popular one.
So it says here, or your ORCID summary or citation, including the DOI/indexing service identifier, the PMID. So if you've got the ORCID summary or the DOI or the PMID, then that counts.
Another question here is, can you define a prize? I think they do mention this in the portfolio guide a little bit as well. It has to be something that's open to everyone, I think. Isn't that right, Jakob? I think you've got the portfolio thing there.
Yeah, that's correct. Undergraduate, postgraduate, it doesn't matter. It can be local, regional, literally anything any prize competition that's open to everyone.
Yeah, exactly. So, for example, it couldn't just be, Jack's private society prize where Jack's the only member, pretty much. So, yeah, it helps if it's part of some kind of national organization, because then the certificate will have something like, I don't know, RCR on the top, or BIR, BSIR, and then once they see that logo, they'll know that this is a legitimate prize. But we had a list in the PowerPoint and also on our website of prizes. Next question, if you do a closed loop audit, but it doesn't necessarily show a big improvement per se in the standards, could it potentially count? Good question. I think some kind of change is necessary. Jakob, you have the portfolio thing for the wording.
So the wording, so they haven't said positive or negative, but they have said if you showed any sort of change, essentially. So the best bet would be to try and obviously show some sort of improvement. And as long as you've closed the loop, then that should count, in my eyes.
Change have resulted in changed practice. I suppose, it could even have had a negative impact, but usually with those, people don't like to publish them. Next is, one second, I think we're at the top. We've got one question coming, I think. Does it matter if you do audit or quality improvement projects? Not at all. So they've stated that you can do either. The most important thing is make sure you have confirmation that you've done it. I did also forget to mention that if you're doing an audit in a department, make sure you speak to the consultant that's the audit lead, because they'll make sure that the audit hasn't already been done in the department. Because if you end up repeating an audit, then it ends up being a complete waste of your time, because the consultant basically won't endorse it. This has actually happened to me. It's a trap that I've fallen into before when I was on surgery, where we started doing an audit and then later realized that actually it had been already done, and they'd in fact collected data over a much longer period than us. So the work we put in was pretty much wasted. So make sure you check before you sort of dive into an audit that it's an okay thing to do. Next question, do you think that I can show a prize more than 10 years ago? I already marked myself down, but I can say, look, I've won that prize 12 years ago. Okay, that's quite a good question. So it sounds like you've already submitted your thing. Let me just look at the exact criteria for the prize.
So remember, they haven't given a timeline. So as long as that was sort of your postgraduate, undergraduate years, that should still be fine. But just double check what it says on Oriel. But I'm pretty sure that should be fine, as long as you've got evidence.
I would agree with Jakob. So that looking at it, there is no deadline on the time. One thing I would say is you can appeal things, or when you upload, I think there is a section to write a note, or possibly in the title of the document you upload. You can say, just write a little note in there saying, after submitting, I realized I actually completed this prize from 12 years ago, for example. And then after they review it, they may or may not allocate you points for that. But even then, if it is genuinely a prize that you think fits the criteria, then appeal your mark, because a few of the people that I've met, so some of the other London trainees, weren't given marks where they thought they should have been, so they appealed, which everyone is allowed to do, and they basically got those marks because they appealed. Usually it involves you just explaining why you think you should have had those marks. So if you make yourself a good explanation for those, then you should be able to get something for it. I think that's all from the questions. So thanks for watching, everyone. We're going to upload this on our website. Again, if you haven't subscribed yet for our sort of mailing list, on our website, there's a link to the form where we'll have we have the other webinars. So we've got the MSRA webinar, which we're going to aim to sort of publish by the end of this month, and then the interview webinar happening next year. We'll do that one once interview invitations have gone out, and I guess we'll see you next time.